The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. Bringing you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
Maryland basketball pulls off a huge win against Wisconsin.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps.
Maryland basketball is on an absolute roll and gets another huge win at home this time against number 17th Wisconsin in a really cool atmosphere. Ahmed, let me know kind of your thoughts overall on the game.
Yeah, obviously back and forth contest. Maryland was really able to kind of take control, obviously, in the second half with that three-point shooting. At one point, they were shooting 70% from three, 33% from inside the arc. So between Selton Miguel, obviously Jacoby Gillespie, and Rodney Rice being able to provide that spark. Julian Reese kind of able to pick up some of that front court scoring as well. So obviously another balanced effort from that starting group. Derek Queen, a little bit of a struggle from a scoring perspective, but I believe he was the first one in double figures in terms of rebounds. Ended up finishing with this sixth double-double of the season. So all around, definitely an encouraging performance. First game with students back. He expected an improved atmosphere inside College Park, and it definitely did not disappoint. And like we said, Maryland gets that much-needed win and gets back to 500 quad one games this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Maryland, to me, has hit their stride over the last really 4, 5, 6 games. We've gotten a lot of wins, and I think, to me, the biggest thing is we figured out how to win games late. I think in other games, and whether it be on the road or at home, we couldn't win games late, whether it was Washington losing by 6 points late in the game, Oregon came down to the wire, even Northwestern was a loss that just we couldn't figure out how to win late. And I saw a Terps team that was back and forth for most of the game against Wisconsin, the 17th ranked Badgers. And I think that was one of my biggest takeaways is watching the Terps being able to win late. I thought that was one of the biggest storylines to me, to be able to really separate and really not make it too much of a sweat at the end of the game. I mean, Wisconsin hit a couple of shots, but it wasn't too big of a deal. Maryland was able to really separate themselves towards the end of the games, and I've seen that on this win streak. Maryland be able to do that is just win games at the end, figure it out.
Yeah, and I actually, I agree with that. I think, the last couple minutes of the first half, I think it was 5-6 minutes left. Wisconsin was holding on to a 3-5 point lead. 6:52 left. Wisconsin was up 23-16, and Maryland was able to get hot a little bit, take advantage from the free throw line. But Derek Queen, Tafara Kapari was able to add in the three as well. So I thought Maryland being able to kind of close that gap a little bit, and obviously going into halftime with that 1 point advantage, I thought was a huge swing. And potentially shaping up for the second half. Obviously, Wisconsin came out firing, but like we said, that 3-point shooting was kind of able to weather the storm and eventually really bring the crowd back into it.
Yeah, the atmosphere is definitely something that I want to touch on because I think by far this game was the best atmosphere that we've seen so far for Maryland basketball, and that stuff matters. College basketball is a sport a lot of students like to go to, a lot of people watch, and the atmosphere and the home court advantage is really a thing. I really noticed that when we would play Illinois, when we played Indiana, our last 2 games before this Wisconsin game, they had a really live atmosphere, and it was cool to see Maryland having a really awesome atmosphere for this game. I thought that was one of the biggest storylines of this game is just the atmosphere that Maryland played with in this game. It was, I guess they call it like a gold out, or I don't know the exact description. Yeah, the gold rush. So I thought that was a big storyline, seeing Maryland fans really come out and get excited about a good basketball team this year.
Yeah, and I think Maryland's. I think they. I don't think they introduced it, but I think it was there when I was in college. Back back when we were still playing Duke. So I guess I'm showing my age a little bit, but obviously, I think Maryland, you always kind of get that kind of that weird period with Maryland because winter break kind of goes so long and goes so late into January where you kind of miss, maybe 2-3 conference games at home. Obviously, you had the Ohio State game in College Park where fans were able to, or students were able to come for that. But like you said, being able to kind of really get the crowd into it and kind of going into the game, was listening to the BTN crew kind of talk about this game, talk about how Wisconsin would have to battle the front court. Derek Queen would, have to have to make some adjustments on the defensive end as well. But Andy Katz kind of pointed to what the X factor would be in this game, and he pointed to that crowd, that atmosphere inside Xfinity Center, and it really felt like in that second half that Maryland kind of needed that point to kind of really get that crowd into it. When I think it was Salt Miguel was the one that hit that 3-pointer to go up to 450, and kind of felt like that was starting to be the turning point. And really since then, it felt like the crowd, not that they weren't before, but they really, really got loud and kind of continued to will Maryland to a victory down the stretch. And I will say, Scott Van Pelt, I think, he talked about in his podcast, I think Maryland basketball, they posted on their Twitter account. This is kind of one of those games where the fans kind of will you to a win. And the fans really did not disappoint tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that of the fans. Not disappointing and really showing out. And I think something else that I want to hit on is the foul trouble is actually really interesting in this game. Wisconsin, two of their best guys got in foul trouble a little bit late in games of their point or late in the first half, which I thought you touched on earlier, how Maryland was able to end the half well and cut the lead. But Maryland guys really were in foul trouble for different parts of the game. What really stood out to me was Rodney Rice getting his fourth foul. I don't think I really processed how many fouls he had when I was watching the game, and you could tell how frustrated he was when he picked up his fourth. And I was like, he seemed a little bit more mad than I thought he would be, just because I didn't realize he had his fourth foul. So I thought that was something that I was really happy about, was Maryland fighting through some of the foul troubles that they had. And then Miguel picked up a late fourth foul as well. I thought Maryland did a really good job of figuring it out while there was some foul trouble going on. And Rodney Rice has been one of our best players, one of our most consistent guys. And that was, I thought, a big part of this game, was figuring out how to win while kind of balancing the foul trouble.
Yeah, and Jacoby Gillespie at one point, he was on the bench with ice on his knee. I think it was that offensive foul call at the under 16 timeout, which was, I could believe it was a little bit of a questionable call, if you ask me, honestly. But Maryland kind of being able to will through it. And again, Derek Queen, we've kind of seen it through conference play, and it's kind of expected. It's understandable at times. I shouldn't say expected, but understandable for a freshman to kind of go through his lulls, especially first round in conference play. And again, Maryland's kind of had to figure out how to win without them. And again, this is a Wisconsin team that again, they especially in that first half, they were able to really do well from three, and that would kind of put a thorn in Maryland's side. So this Wisconsin team also plays Maryland well historically inside Xfinity. So again, I think Rodney Rice, like you mentioned, picking up a couple of those fouls. I think it was 3 fouls in the first 8 minutes of the second half. South Miguel picked up 2 coming out of that under 8 timeout. So again, Maryland kind of being able to mitigate some of that down the stretch. You saw a lot of Jay Young. You saw a lot more Deshaun Harris-Smith, especially after not seeing the bench really these last couple of games. In Illinois, against Indiana. So seeing Jay Young, Deshaun Harris-Smith, who hit that big 3 to kind of jumpstart that run. I think it was Deshaun Harris-Smith, Miguel, then Bryce to kind of put Maryland ahead and really, like we said, get the crowd into it. But to get some of those contributions from the bench, I thought was a lift for Maryland.
Yeah, before we move on, I thought the bench was big, because you saw, like you talked about, Deshaun Harris-Smith hitting a huge 3, Gapari hitting a huge 3, and that's something that hasn't really been there a ton this year, and I'd probably argue is probably the weakness of this Maryland team, is probably the bench. I think the starting 5, like the Big Ten cast was talking about, really good starting 5, amongst the best in the Big Ten. Maybe you could argue the best in the Big Ten, but the bench is definitely something that is definitely a question mark. So seeing Deshaun Harris-Smith, we know struggles with confidence sometimes with the shot, hit a huge shot. Credit to those guys off the bench, and credit to Kevin Willard for being able to get those guys going a little bit off the bench.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, the bench, in terms of bench production, I do think that is kind of a glaring, weakness, kind of a concern for Maryland right now. Something that you can definitely point to. But I'll make the argument that, a Jay Young, when he's coming into the game, you're not asking a Jay Young type to, really be a score first point guard. You're kind of looking at him to be a facilitator. And again, Willard talked about in preseason, that's kind of lived up into the season, into conference play. He's definitely an asset on the defensive end. And, Deshaun Harris-Smith, obviously, his struggles. But again, hit a timely three like we talked about. He's able to kind of provide that strength on defense as well. And then Tafari Kapari, him and Jordan Geronimo, he talked about, he was asked about substitution methods and, what kind of goes into it, what's his thought process. And he says, that's a lot more of, matchup based, when you look at an Illinois type where it's, a lot more, just fast tempo, especially with the Illini big man out. You kind of need your guards and, Tafari Kapari, that's kind of a better fit. And then Indiana, where it's a lot more bruiser, you have the big men from Indiana, where it's just, you got to win the boards, got to win the paint. It's just a more of a Geronimo type fit. So I do think that Maryland kind of has some complementary pieces that kind of come off the bench. But again, I think that the little concern, I guess why I don't view that as much of a concern for me is kind of what we talked about tonight, all 5 starters finishing in double figures. So they re-emphasizing what you said. Great win tonight.
Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bet as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Live betting lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. And the app is easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5. And if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
An absolutely massive game by Chris Beard and the Ole Miss Rebels to knock off the Texas Longhorns 72-69. Hello, I am Stephen Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and we are going to do a little bit of a live post game of this massive victory for Ole Miss. We talked about all week how this game had a chance to make things get out of control for Ole Miss and a potential 6-game losing streak. We talked about that over the course of the week. That is not a concern anymore. And now you can kind of turn the page a little bit. And if Ole Miss either beats Kentucky or Auburn, you're sitting in pretty good position 10 games into the schedule. And I'm pretty excited about that. Hey, and also my prediction for the game, I predicted 72-66. It was 72-69, but I am going to take the victory where I can get it on this one. Ole Miss scoring 72 points in the game. They did hold Texas to 69 points for the game. Listen, it was an awesome game. It really was. In the first 4 games of the SEC slate, although many of them looked the same, many of them looked like tonight's game looked. They happened in different ways. Malik Dia was a star in the early part of the season. Everybody knows how much of a matchup problem that Malik Dia was in the early part of the season. Starting with about the Mississippi State game, people started to figure out Malik Dia. So Malik Dia obviously was not going to be Batman. Ole Miss needed to find a Batman. Ole Miss needed to find a Robin, and both of those could not be Malik Dia. And tonight, Sean Padula stepped up. He absolutely did with, I think it was 19 points on the night, 4 of 7 shooting. He was 1 of 2 from the line. But Dre Davis really stepped up for the second time this year, probably. Looking at it, I think the Louisville game was another that Dre Davis actually absolutely played well and was a catalyst for getting Ole Miss to the free throw line, which they haven't really done. Ole Miss was 19 of 25 at the line in this game. We're going to go over all the numbers in the second segment. But Dre Davis having a big day was awesome. Also want to point out Davin Barnes, a little bit of retribution for the Texas A&M game, stepping up to the line with 8 seconds to go with a one-on-one and nailing both free throws, making it a 3-point game. Now, Texas had an amazing look at the end of the game. There was obviously a bust on the full court defense, and Trey Johnson got a wide open look that he just missed at the end of the game. The benefit is if he would have made it, it would have only been a tie game, but he ended up missing the shot. Ole Miss ended up getting the win, moving to 5-3 in the Southeastern Conference, with Auburn coming into the Pavilion on Saturday, Kentucky coming in next week. It puts Ole Miss basketball back to a feel-good slot. Remember, if you're going to comment on the thread, please put where you're commenting from. We're going to hit that in the third segment. We have about a 15-minute third segment, and we want to take comments as people are celebrating this win as well. But it was nice that Dre Davis actually stepped up. Matthew Morrell didn't look right. He just doesn't look right. He doesn't look as explosive as he normally is. But I will say this. When Matthew Morrell was on the floor for Ole Miss went on a run, cut into Texas's lead. Texas had a 13-point lead after a slow start. This game started off poorly, like a lot of Ole Miss basketball games have during this SEC slate. Texas had 7 offensive rebounds within the first 5 minutes of the game. It looked like Ole Miss was going to absolutely get mauled on the board. After that 5 minutes, though, Ole Miss kind of played them even, and that's how they were able to chip into the lead. They did it with that and defensive pressure. In the first half, Texas shot 52% from the field, which is very un-Chris Beard-like and Ole Miss basketball-like to allow somebody to shoot that. They finished up under 40% for the game. So the defense got right in the second half. And Sean Padula and Dre Davis were big parts of that. Jamin Brakefield also had 16 points on the night. A little bit of a weird thing, couple of weird decisions made towards the end, but Ole Miss was able to pull off this win. Like I said, I'm really proud for Devin Barnes, hitting that one-on-one and setting that up to where another Texas A&M situation didn't happen. We all thought about it when it was going on. It's like, is this going to happen to Ole Miss again? But Ole Miss was able to pull it off. They advanced to 5-3 in the Southeastern Conference with Auburn coming in Saturday. Ole Miss is going to be a considerable dog to Auburn on Saturday. And then you can hopefully get that win against Kentucky. And if you do that, you're 6-4 after 10 games with only 2 wins left to get to the NCAA tournament. If you go by what other people are saying, and Ole Miss will just be gravy. One more win out of the next 2 games, and Ole Miss's schedule is just nice. You have Mississippi State and Oxford. You don't have to worry about playing Florida. You don't have to worry about Tennessee, although Tennessee right now doesn't look particularly scary, but I know that they can step up and get you if you're not careful. But you'll see with the games coming up that Ole Miss has a chance to do pretty well for themselves. All right, so let's look at the stats of this game real quick. If you look at the box score overall, Ole Miss did beat Texas 72-69. Both teams shot the same from the outside. Texas, though, shot 52% in the first half, and their percentage dropped down a good bit. So I'd have to think they shot probably in the 20s in the second half. Ole Miss was 7-21 from 3. Texas was 5-22. Ole Miss only had 4 turnovers for the game. Texas had 11. Rebounding wise, Ole Miss kind of fought to a stalemate after a very rocky first 5 minutes of the game, but Texas won the overall 42-33, and the fouls were 17-16. Looking at the big-time players in this game, there were 3 players for Ole Miss that scored over 15 points. That was Sean Padula at 19, Dre Davis at 17, and Jamin Brakefield at 16. Texas was paced by Trey Johnson, who honestly had a good day shooting free throws. He did not have a good day overall. He ended up with 22 points, but it was a hard-fought 22 points. He ended up 6 of 16 from the field, 2 for 8 from three-point range. He was 8 of 8 from the line. He only had 2 rebounds, 3 assists. Now, if you want to look at assists, Sean Padula had 5. Matthew Morrell had 4. Jamin Brakefield had 4. Jamin Brakefield also had 4 blocks. It was a very, very high-energy game from Jamin, and congratulations to everything that he was able to do as well. You look at how this game went. Texas shot 85% from the line. Ole Miss shot 76% from the line. Ole Miss had 8 offensive rebounds. Texas had 14 offensive rebounds, but I told you what happened in the first 5 minutes of the game. Ole Miss did a good job of kind of fighting them to a stalemate after this game started very poorly. And Ole Miss was able to kind of chip back into the game, chip a little bit into the game. And once they kind of got their hands around that chip into the game, because in the first half, it was like, man, Ole Miss is down by 4 points at halftime, and they shouldn't be. It was like they weren't playing well defensively. They weren't shooting particularly well. There was an aggression to their game that was a little bit different. But you were like, okay, Ole Miss was fortunate to be only 4 points down at halftime. In the second half, Ole Miss kind of took over that game. It wasn't a situation like Auburn or Alabama whenever in the second half, Ole Miss just kind of just squeezed the vice on the other team and outscored them by 10 points. That wasn't what was happening in the game. Ole Miss didn't shoot well enough for that to happen, but Ole Miss was able to control the game defensively in the second half. And I was pretty impressed with what I saw. Again, Dre Davis, really big performance in this game. Really big. It was fantastic to see. And if Dre Davis can duplicate that, if he can replicate it with Sean Padula playing smarter in this game, if Malik Dia steps up a little bit more, if he figures it out again, Jamin Brakefield continues to have that day, Ole Miss is going to be a tough out. Again, we talked about this all the time. Ole Miss at its ceiling can make a run in the NCAA tournament. Absolutely. Depending on the draw, Ole Miss can absolutely make a run in the NCAA tournament. The floor on this team, though, is like a bubbly level NCAA tournament team. I think this team is good enough to make the tournament. It was always good enough to make the tournament. The only way that it would have gotten weird is if Ole Miss had that 6-game losing streak to where it could kind of snowball a little bit. Now that Ole Miss has some good vibes and they're back in the win column, and you got Auburn coming in for essentially a free shot for the basketball team just to kind of see what's happening. The pavilion's going to be absolutely rocking. It's going to be Saturday at 2 o'clock Eastern or something like that. And it could be amazing. But it will be important because of the next 2 games. There's Auburn Saturday, Kentucky midweek next week. You need probably to get one of those games. If you can do that, you are in beyond good shape in the Southeastern Conference. You go from the threat in this game to losing this game and potentially losing 6 in a row to being in completely good shape by the end of this. If Ole Miss can go 1-1 between Auburn and Kentucky, you are absolutely golden, and we're talking about probably a 6 seed or a 5 seed for the NCAA tournament come March.
Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bet as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Live betting lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is easy to navigate, plus knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
Day 2 of the 2025 Reese Senior Bowl practices.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Jackson Dart, quarterback from Ole Miss. He didn't this wasn't a wow performance today. But what he did do, Keith, is he ran the offense efficiently. He made throws. He was accurate. He got the ball out typically on time for the most part. He had a nice deep outcut throw to Ty Felton. He had a nice, I think it was like a slot curl to between two defenders to Jake Brenningstool, who I'll talk about in a little bit, the tight end out of Clemson. I think Jackson Dart, because, they threw the ball a little bit more today. We asked for that yesterday, Keith. Can you throw the ball a little bit more for the second practice?
They listen.
So shout out to the Brown staff, right? They listen a little bit. But Jackson Dart, he did well. And I think for him, it was like, hey, he didn't push the ball vertically down the field. Not a lot of guys are right now. And they're more so checking it down, hitting the first option. When they called it for him, Keith, he hit it. And I think that's the main thing you wanted to see. Just complete the passes, do what the play is designed, and he's good at doing that, right? Hopefully, and we'll talk about it later on, but, hopefully we see more vertical shots on the final day of practice. But, I think Jackson Dart helped himself today.
Yeah, DP, I agree with that. I'm going to go to another quarterback, too. I'm going to go Dylan Gabriel because I think this is his second day kind of being solid, and I think he's carving out a role of the thing is that if you're evaluating quarterbacks, right, if you're looking for elite arm talent and one thing, right, but if there's the category of, okay, can this guy get through his progressions and throw accurate passes? I think Dylan Gabriel is a quarterback that can potentially be for you and your team, right? If you're a timing and rhythm guy, you want an experienced guy, you want a guy that appears to be able to see the whole field, make good decisions ultimately with the football, then Dylan Gabriel, I think he's carving out a niche for him. I think that we were a little worried that, it would be the same type of hype as the guy from BYU. I know you mentioned that a couple.
Oh, Jaron Hall.
Yeah, yep. And then seeing him in person, but Dylan looks to like that much experience, right, in college has helped him, right, and being in new environments and different situations has helped him. That I'll say, like day 1 and day 2, he's probably been the most steady quarterback, right, as far as exactly what you're getting rep in and rep out. But I'm gonna go to the backfield too, DP, and staying with that first practice. I'm going to go 1, Ollie Gordon, and then 2, Damian Martinez. I think that both of those guys, with the lack of production from this past year, not that they became afterthoughts, but people were associating the production with their, questioning their lack of talent. But I think here in this environment, and this is what we asked for, right? When we came, DP, when we did the Senior Bowl preview shows, we was like, hey, get you out of that environment, see what you're able to do. You look at Ollie Gordon, he looks every bit of 6'3", 230 pounds, right? Like, hey, that's a big back right there. Then you got Damian Martinez thumping in between the tackles, and you're saying, okay, this guy still has juice too, and he's willing to finish runs. It's funny because they almost look like the Pittsburgh Steelers backfield, right? It almost looks like the Najee Harris and Warren combination with those two guys with the national team. So that's two running backs I'll say that made themselves some money too.
Yeah, no, especially like when I was watching Damian Martinez, he had some solid runs today, just good footwork, patience, vision, getting into the hole, getting in and out of the lanes, and getting upfield. I like what I saw from him. Keeping it with the running backs. Devin Neal had a good day toting the rock in the second practice. Decisive, good vision, patience as well. Showcase a solid burst. There was one run where he had to negotiate a free runner in the backfield. He gave him a little dead leg. Got outside, beat the pursuit angle and everything like that. It just showcased that ability for him. Keith, Jalen Noel. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm going with DP. We have to throw this in, right? I'm gonna say this. Who? Mike Green, right? We have to Mike Green making himself some money. Whenever you go viral, DP, it's a good thing, right? On the football field. Well, most times, it's a good thing. And that's exactly what Mike Green did. You're talking about lifting another 300-pound man, getting straight to the power, right? And I think that's going to bode really well for him. And I would expect him being a small school guy, right? Where's Marshall is not, is it the MAC? Is Marshall the MAC?
Marshall or AAC maybe?
Yeah, one of the two, right? But you think about a comp that is probably going to start getting thrown around for this guy is going to be Khalil Mack, right? And him coming out of Buffalo.
They're in the Sun Belt.
They're in the Sun Belt, okay. Khalil Mack would be a comp that's probably going to start getting thrown around. And seeing this guy in person, he has the build, DP. I was one of those guys that I questioned what was his actual frame, what was his actual power, what was his actual strength, right? His functional strength. Well, guess what? He said, Mr. Keith Sanchez, you question it, I'm going to give you the answer, right? And he went straight through through the offensive tackle in that rep. And you have to say that was definitely a guy that made himself some money, right?
No, 100%. I think he showcased that he's not just a guy that has a great ghost move and the dip and bend around the edge, but he should listen, if you are not set, if your feet aren't underneath you, and if you expose your chest, I'm going to run through you and I'm going to power through you.
You better get ready.
You better get ready, man. So I love what I saw from him. And I think, honestly, Keith, let's be honest about it real quick. He's probably been the best edge out here. Like, you know what I mean? And this is a good edge group of guys and everything, man. So I think he's absolutely not just made himself some money. I think he stamped himself more than likely as a first-round pick. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's worked himself into that top 20. When you think about teams that need edge rushers, I'm looking at Carolina Panthers. Again, you won 2 of your last 3. Panthers fan didn't like when I said it. I said, hey, these wins are meaningless because now you're moved out of the Abdul Carter range where you were right in that spot for him potentially.
Yeah.
Because, like I always say, on the third downs, I need a bucket getter. I think the Panthers would be a team at number 8 that, or maybe, I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets too, because Jermaine Johnson's coming up on the contract. He's coming off the injury. And even if he wasn't, you still need another edge rusher opposite of him anyway. Like I could still see him going top 10 to a team that absolutely needs to improve the edge rush group. Keith, I'm like real quick, man. Jaden Higgins, big wide receiver out of Iowa State. You talk about bounce back performance.
Him and Pat Bryant.
Like we talked about it, doing too much. When you're 6'3", Keith, it's a lot of stuff you can't do or you shouldn't do. And like that's what him and Pat Bryant were doing on day one.
Yep.
Watch Jaden Higgins just play his game. Smooth releases, decisive steps, moving guys out the contact window. He beat one guy down the field vertically, and it was like, yeah, I could, because once he opens that stride, he's 6'3" with long legs. He eats grass with that stride. Once he gets past you and he stacks you, he tracks the ball well. He got open multiple times. I was impressed with him today, Keith. And then I'll close it out. His teammate as well. A shout out to Harold Jr. He bounced back as well, had a good day. Jalen Noel had a really good day today as well. Just I think I came in with a third on him, like a mid-third. I think he's moving himself up with his ability to get open. He had an adjustment on the deep ball. I think it was against Ezariah Thomas, and it was a battle between the two. I think Ezariah was right in his hip pocket. Ezariah looked over the wrong shoulder. Jalen saw it coming, and then he made an outstanding just adjustment catch on it. And then, Keith, I'll close this out. Jake Brenningstew had an outstanding day, and this tight end group in general, man. Like he keeps saying it. This is one of the better and more in-depth tight end groups in terms of talent. If your team needs a tight end, Indianapolis Colts, you might want to walk out of this class with at least 2 of them, or probably 2 of them, because this class, Jake Brenningstew, 6'5", 240, 45 pounds. He gets open. He gets to his landmarks. He's a big target. In congestion, he's so comfortable catching the football, man. Like this was a good day, a better day than what we saw yesterday, which should be expected. Keith, it was day 1 of practice. I think the coaches had to feel everything out. And the players did as well.